Compilation parameters about Intarsia mainly include two. One is the setting of the number of safety needles. One is the choice of Intarsia parameters. Back to safety stage setting interface. Yarn feeder indicates the same rail. Safety needle count for 2 yarn feeders. This number of stitches is greater than yarn feeder width plus the number of stitches at the parking point. Intarsia combination needle number indicates Intarsia weaving. Minimum number of stitches combined into one head stroke. This number of stitches is generally not less than 1 inch of stitches. Yarn parking minimum indicates when knitting on the machine. The minimum number of stitches at the stop point of the yarn feeder. Maximum yarn feed parking point for internal knitting need to be greater than the number of stitches at the yarn feeder parking point. Intarsia parameters. Connection method between each Intarsia yarn feeder. How the connection is handled and where the connection is made. Connection order between each Intarsia yarn feeder. Sequence of tucks and knitting connections. Jacquard connection. Set 1 join local jacquard. Single line mode. Inside the irregular Intarsia pattern. How the yarn feeder moves when adding multiple needles at a time. Single line mode range. Perform single row mode in this range of stitch counts. Otherwise, it is the normal bring in and bring out method. Area lengths for single row knitting need to exceed the number of stitches followed by the yarn feeder. Single row mode single needle handling. Intarsia plus or minus 1 stitch connection processing. If you choose not to process, then deal with the connection mode. Add 1 stitch. As shown in the picture, add 1 stitch to knit in advance. This kind of processing weaving efficiency is low. Allow kick with double yarn feeder. Optimize the kicking action by kicking 2 or 3 yarn feeders at a time. Reduce the number of action lines. Enable two-line optimization. In order to improve efficiency when Intarsia is split. 1 yarn feeder continuously knits 2 rows for split optimization. Poor connection. Enable bilateral optimization. Optimize transfer and knitting movements. Reduce the number of lines. If there is a transfer position, the split is not ideal. Try unchecking. Below is the yarn setting. Bring out method, bring in method. Indicates the Intarsia yarn feeder take in and take out method. Bring the minimum number of needles. Indicates when the yarn feeder is brought in and out. Less than the number of stitches. Then automatically kick the yarn feeder. Otherwise, it will be handled as Intarsia bring in and bring out. The number of stitches should not be too large. Knot indicates the knotting method when the Intarsia yarn feeder is brought in. Number of rows times of falling cloth interval. When brought in using the front hanging and back weaving method. Configurable drop parameters. That is, the back knitting loop is after the specified knitting row. Drop the cloth according to the specified number of times. Yarn feeder row number. When the yarn feeder is not used within the specified number of rows, stay in the weaving area without taking it out. Yarn feeder is brought. Start edge of next knitting area. Kick yarn feeder. Yarn feeder stop stitches. Indicates the number of lines due to the yarn feeder's stay. Taken to the start edge of the next knitting area. If the number of stitches away from the edge of the pattern at this time less than the number of stop needles, the yarn feeder is automatically brought out to the edge of the pattern. Back to the main compilation interface. In general, the compilation parameters can be selected by default. If the pattern is more complex, parameters can be customized. Select ADF model. Final compilation. View the boarding documents. Let's click on the specified yarn feeder. You can check the knitting range and knitting direction of the yarn feeder. Navigate to a row in the PAT graph. You can view the knitting status of the row and the knitting situation of other yarn feeders.